Righty-ho. We are here today with Justin Lee Anderson, author of, okay, excuse me if I get this wrong because I want to say the Latin, Carpet Diem?
That's right, yes.
Okay, I really want to say the Latin, but no, false. And then let me, hold on, I've got the website. The Lost War. I was
That's
going to
right.
say the Last War, but yes.
That's a mistake people have made, yes.
Yeah, well, I assume that it's not the last war. That's just...
Sadly not, no. I don't imagine that's ever coming, sadly. But yes, The Lost War is the right one.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on at the moment, and then we'll get into your other books.
Okay, great. So as you said, I'm Justin Lee Anderson. My first book, Carpet Diem, is a comedy fantasy. Was published back in 2015 originally, and then I republished it myself in 2018. My second book, The Lost War, is completely different. Well, it's fantasy, but it's an epic fantasy mystery. There's not really a comedy element to it, which probably makes terrible business sense. But it was the book I really wanted to write. So, and I had started working on the sequel to Carpet Diem, as I had been promising readers I would. At the beginning of this year. But then when the lockdown hit for COVID, I just found that I couldn't write funny at all. And so I switched to, I am now writing the sequel to The Lost War, it's the first in a trilogy. And I know what the two following books are going to be, the storyline of the two following books. And it's a darker, more straightforward story. Well, not straightforward, but straight, not comedy. And so I found that much easier to write. So I'm working on that instead. I'm about 45,000 words into it, and it should be out in early 2021, all being well.
Hooray. Fantastic. Well, we'll look forward to that. Okay, so I guess we'll start with The Lost War, since you're writing the continuation of that.
Sure.
So tell us a bit about that, because epic fantasy plus mystery, I mean, that's not the most common combination, I have to say. I've seen it a couple of times, but not all that often.
Sure. So The Lost War is set in a sort of pseudo-medieval fantasy kingdom, which is based on my hometown of Edinburgh. I used to write a guidebook to Edinburgh, and in doing that, I did a lot of research into the history, the folk tales, mythology. There's a lot of really great ghost stories and gruesome tales of old Edinburgh.
Edinburgh's great for old tales like that.
Exactly, we've got loads of them. So I did a lot of reading on those, and there's some properly grim historical events that actually happened in Edinburgh as well. So I knew all this background, and I kind of wanted to write something set in a world based on that, and the etymology of a lot of the place names of Edinburgh. Some of them are really interesting, and so that was my setting that I wanted to have. And within that setting, what we have is a group of characters led by the main character is Aronach. He's the Gaelic word for druid or wizard is pronounced. I think it's pronounced Draui or Dri, or it's a bit like that. I'm not sure I can say it properly, and I probably should have thought of that before I wrote it. But he is the first Drai in a world where they are treated with suspicion and prejudice to get as high a position as King's Envoy.
Oh.
And in the aftermath of a really bloody, brutal war against another Drai, who has been trapped in the old seat of the king in the castle in Dunedin, he is sent with a group of relative strangers to help restore a foreign queen to her throne in the hope of creating an ally for the kingdom in this time when it is in a bit of a state. And the mystery comes in that when they travel the country, they start to discover that things are not what they should be. And they find some very confusing things happening, and they find some things are not as they've been told. And without saying too much more about it, the gist of the story, because it's really hard to talk about this book without spoilers, actually. I did an interview about this yesterday, and it's so hard to say much of anything without spoiling something. But suffice to say, it comes around to the fact that the book is about them figuring out why things are wrong, what's wrong, and is there somebody behind it, and if so, who and why.
Right, right. And in the midst of all of that, they have to restore a foreign queen to her throne.
Exactly. That's their core mission. They get sidetracked a lot. The main characters in this were based on characters that friends and I role played for a lot of years, and there is, in terms of the sort of getting sidetracked by subplots, it's got a real RPG feel to it, where every now and again something comes up and they go, "Oh, what's that?" and they follow that plot line for. But yes, it's all about fundamentally the mystery, and there's a big element of the characters themselves having to kind of figure out how to work together. The relationships between the characters are developed as it goes on. They're quite complex. I have, I think, 5 or 6 maybe point of view characters throughout the book. 4 main ones, 4 of them that are consistently point of view characters, but there are a couple of others that have a few scenes.
Sure.
And so their relationships develop and change as they try to figure out what's going on, and as they get to know each other. And do they trust each other? Should they trust each other? It's a big part of the story.
Aha. Of course, I want to ask about book 2 now, but spoilers. So.
Yes. I answered this question in an interview yesterday, and my wife watched it back and was like, "You have to be careful what you say." I was like, "Yeah, I do, don't I?" Yes, book 2 is very informed by the end of book 1.
Okay, book 2. Continuation. Things happen. Read the books.
Exactly. Yes.
All right. Then I shall move on to the other book.
Sure.
Which has pseudo-Latin that I really have a hard time saying. I don't know why this bothers me so much, but I want to say carpe diem, not carpet.
Sure.
Anyways.
There's a story about that, actually. It was that book took me probably... not exaggerating, it might have taken 15 years to write, from the first time I sat down with a pen and paper and literally wrote down the first scene by hand. And for the entirety of its process of being written, it was called The Carpet Trade. And it was just before it was going to be published. It was originally published by a small publisher. Just before it was going to be published, they said to me, this title doesn't work. We need a new title. And I was like, okay, right, I need a better title. Fine, I can come up with that. And I was sitting on the couch one day, literally, with my wife and I were sitting chatting, and I went, Carpet Diem, that's it, that's the title. So it was just like from nowhere. It was like, that's it, that's the title. But it's been funny because I've had you get people who are quite keen to be the grammar police online, and I say that knowing fine well that sometimes it's me, but there was a person who basically saw the title of the book on the book cover and went on a rant about why sub-editors don't correct people's spellings, because unless there's actually a carpet as part of this storyline, then you've misspelled the title of your book, mate. And I was like, dude, it's a pun. It's like a rug is the central concept of the story. If you read the blurb, it explains that. Like, I didn't mean to write carpet. It wasn't an accident. I know how to spell.
That's
but
great.
It's just,
it was fantastic.
Funny.
No,
so yeah, Carpe Diem is a comedy, as I said, so that's why it's called Carpe Diem.
No, I get it, and it makes perfect sense when I read the blurb, but for some reason my brain just says, not quite. We're not quite there yet. And it could be that I haven't had enough tea today. I'm still waking up, so.
Fair enough. Oh, of course, yeah. It's early. It's sort of 2:00 in the afternoon here, so.
Okay, sure. Yeah. It's been a while since I've been on Edinburgh time. Ooh.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm awake at this time anyways. I'm just not usually fully processing brain-wise.
Fair enough. I completely sympathise. Me neither.
All right. So tell us a bit about the book that involves a carpet.
So yes. So Carpet Diem is about a hermit who has essentially stayed in his house for 13 years, which seems a lot less unlikely these days, actually, on reflection than it did when I came up with it. But the sort of elevator pitch of this is: a hermit discovers that his living room carpet is the deciding factor in a bet between God and Satan. And that was kind of the idea that came to me originally was, that'd be interesting. What would that story be about? And then it grew from there. So that is the basic premise. He discovers early on that essentially his the entire world's idea of religions are wrong, basically, and that what we think of as God and Satan are actually siblings who accidentally created the universe via the Big Bang. And they've been going around seeding planets with versions of themselves and betting on which side will win, whether males or females will become dominant on each planet. But what they've discovered is that as a side effect of requiring them to breed, they always tend to end up in a stalemate. So they've started running these side bets to settle the issue. And Simon Debevar, the main character's living room carpet, is the final deciding factor in who wins between God and Satan.
Oh, yeah. For someone who hasn't left their flat in 13 years, that would be a really bad day.
Yeah, he's not happy about it. Yeah. He doesn't cope well. He's a very antisocial person. He doesn't like people. He thinks everybody's really rude and smells bad and should wash more. And he's a real curmudgeon of a person. He has no people skills. Funnily enough, he ends up being kind of dragged out into the world and forced to interact with people. Well, and he has to figure out how to do that and also, not accidentally end the world while he's at it.
I like that. That sounds really entertaining.
Cool.
I was going to ask about the blurb if he was a professional hermit, because I know that's sometimes a thing, but I realized now that you've described it, he's an actual hermit.
He is an actual hermit. His most of his family, bar a great aunt and a couple of cousins, were killed in a giant pudding explosion 15 years ago.
Pudding explosion?
Indeed.
Okay, what? I have to ask.
There was a great family gathering, and the chef overloaded the desserts with alcohol, and when they lit them, the whole place went up. And only 3 of the family were outside the building at that time.
Oh. Oh, yeah. I mean, you're usually supposed to, bake most of that alcohol off when you're doing that. And then there's a bit of drizzle, and then you whoosh. Oops.
Yeah, they got it wrong.
Yeah,
so yes, damaged by that, and by his own sort of antisocial, or I don't know if he's antisocial or if he's just socially awkward. I suppose maybe it's both. He decides after a couple of years of that he's just not leaving the house anymore. So 13 years later, we pick up the story.
I like it. That's fantastic. Oh, I'm going to have fun reading that one. I'm going to have fun reading both of them because mystery is one of my favorites. But anyways, I digress. Okay, fun. Ooh, so you're 45,000 words into the next bit of the not comedic fantasy.
Yes, the Eden Trilogy, which the Lost Wars book one off. That's right.
Sure. So what's that whole process looking like? Are you in the stage of grumble, or things are actually doing well?
Well, good question, actually. The way I write with this series in particular, I wrote Carpe Diem differently, but the way I wrote The Lost One and the way I am writing this book is that I know the end, and I know waypoints along the way. So I know that this needs to happen, and then I know that this needs to happen, and then I know that this needs to happen. But in between, I don't plot that. I take the characters and I work out what they're motivated to do next, and then I write the scenes and try to just have the characters follow what they would naturally do.
Right.
And so sometimes that goes quite far away from where I thought it was going to finish up, and I have to reevaluate where we go next. But I tend to still hit the major plot points in terms of I need this to happen because then that affects this. So I've just hit the first major kind of waypoint of the storyline, which I knew was coming. And I've ended up I thought it was going to be a sort of quick, maybe 1 chapter thing. And we've ended up being there for, I think, maybe 3 or 4 chapters now. And a lot more has happened than I thought was going to happen. And it's going to be
Oh
a much
no.
more significant part of the story than I thought it was going to be. And it's changed. I think it might well have changed significantly all 3 characters that have kind of been tied up in it. So
Uh-oh.
I'm now like, I've just finished that, and I'm now like, now what do I do with these guys? Like, and also we've got another group in another place, and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't. What have they been doing all this time? Why we haven't been to see them? What are they up to? So I've got to think about. I'm kind of at the point now where I'm like, okay, there's roughly, let's just say, slightly less than a third of the book written, and now I really have to reconsider. Like, wait, does this going to affect what they do next? Has this changed them such that they'll do something other than what I thought they were going to do? So I'm a little bit shining a flashlight at the moment and trying to figure out quite exactly where we go next from where we are.
Yeah, oops. Characters, when they do something other than expected, it can be quite problematic if you have an idea of where you're meant to be going.
Yes, I mean that's the thing. I try to. It's a balancing act, isn't it, between having the characters drive the narrative and having the plot drive the narrative. And I think what I try to do is stick to the overall plot so that we still get to the same end point, whether we may have taken a different route to get there. But I think it's always important to make sure that the characters act consistently with their personalities, and that that what they do is believable, and it doesn't feel like they're making stupid decisions because the plot requires them to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, there's the ongoing debate between character-driven and plot-driven novels.
Sure.
And a lot of times in epic fantasy, you get well, things are happening and it's not going well, and the characters have to just deal with it.
Yeah. I mean, The Lost War, I tried very hard not to just have it be about the plot, but the plot was quite complex.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people have sort of talked about the plot being the thing about it that struck them. And I'm happy with that. I mean, it was, I worked hard on it, so I'm happy
Sure.
that they appreciate that. But I've been pleased that a lot of people have also sort of said, really love these characters, want to spend more time with these characters, because that was something I think didn't come as naturally to me, and I had to work harder on it, I think, than probably the plotting side of it. So it was really gratifying that people were saying they really liked the characters as well.
Yeah. Well, that's always the fun part, because I mean, you put so much into the characters, and hopefully they're interesting, and it's not just people to move the plot along.
Yeah, and I think if I think about the stuff that I really enjoyed, whether it's books or TV or whatever, more often than not, it's the characters that make me think I want to go spend more time in that world. I want to go hang out with those people. It's not the, oh, that was an amazing storyline. Like that gets you once, kind of. You get the storyline and you go, that was great. What a great storyline. But actually what keeps you coming back and thinking about it is that you enjoyed the world and you really enjoyed the characters. So I think that's important.
Yeah. So as far as world goes, since you brought it up, how much do you go into building the world beforehand as opposed to characters figuring out as they go?
With Carpet Diem, I winged it. I really pantsed that book to a great extent. I in fact dreamt the setting of the middle section of the book one night, woke up with it and was like, that's the middle of the book right there, and had to roll over and write notes down because I was just like, that's it, it's perfect. I can't believe I hadn't thought of that. Mm-hmm. With The Lost War, it was much more considered, because it was the whole world was going to be based on Edinburgh, and so right. I did a lot of research. Particularly, I went and found some etymology resources to find the backgrounds of where names had evolved from and stuff, and a lot of that really did inform the book. So there's an order of the White Thorns, who are a religious order of knights who are trained from childhood to fight demons, basically, and they are based in a place called Bailanich, I think it's pronounced, but again, my Gaelic pronunciation is not great. If you can speak Gaelic, and I'm getting this horribly wrong, in fact, I can't even believe I just said Gaelic instead of Gaelic. If you can speak Gaelic and I'm getting this horribly wrong, I'm really sorry. I struggle to pronounce Gaelic words. So they come from a place called Bailanich, which is the old version of a place just outside Edinburgh called Balerno now. And it's named that. I think it translates from memory as something like the place of the hawthorns. And the hawthorn plant has white flowers with thorns. And so that kind of whole idea became the origin of I knew I wanted this kind of order of religious knights, but I didn't know where they were going to be from, what they were going to be called. But they became the Order of the White Thorns because of the etymology of essentially the town of Balerno. So a lot of it really fed right into the world building of just picking stuff from history. There's a place called Cairamon in the book, which is essentially ruins. It's one of the earliest settlements in the country, but it's in ruins now. And that in Edinburgh it's Cramond is the area as it's called now. And there's some really old Roman site down there. I think there's an old Roman bathhouse or something in there. But it's an old site where kind of Romans had in this out. So again, that kind of inspired my thinking of, well, let's have some ruins down there of an old settlement and do something with that in the storyline. And it ends up playing a big part in the storyline as well. So yeah, Edinburgh's history and all that really fed into it, and it helped me to build quite a rich world without having to just come up with it all out of my own head. It was really easy to take those things and transport them into my world and make them work.
That is often very useful because building a world from scratch can be a bit complicated. Absolutely.
And it was another thing that I felt I had to work at. As I say, with Carpe Diem, I mean, Carpe Diem was essentially set in the modern world.
Right.
It's just that it's full of magic and immortals and angels and demons. Whereas, the Lost World was a world I was creating from scratch. But knowing that I was basing it on something that I could draw from for all kinds of stuff, like, mythology and inspiration for other things, was really helpful.
Huh. Very interesting. All right, I'm going to move sideways because I can.
Okay.
So, in your genre out there, and I would say you can pick either the comedic fantasy or the fantasy plus mystery bit, is there an author out there whose abilities you'd like to steal to improve your own stories?
Ooh. He's not quite my genre.
Sure.
But I was just talking the other day about how much I admire Joe Abercrombie's ability to really get you in a scene and feel like you're there. His descriptive ability, but also his ability to humanize a character very quickly and put you in their head and put you in their life and make you interested in them and make you feel the atmosphere that they're feeling and experience what they're experiencing is just brilliant. He's so good at it, and I very much I covet that ability. Definitely, yes, to be able to really describe things the way he does and really humanize his characters. He's absolutely brilliant at it.
Yeah, that is one thing that I think many authors would like to be able to do to that particular level.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, something to aspire to.
Exactly. I mean, the more of his books I read, surely eventually I'll be able to do it. I mean, it's got to rub off, surely.
Right. Exactly. The more you do something, the better at it you get. I mean, theoretically, practice, etc., etc.
Absolutely.
Maybe. Although some days I go back and read old stuff, and it's
Yeah. I mean, you get the two sides of it, though. Sometimes I go back and read old stuff, and I'm like, oh, who wrote that? And sometimes I go back and I read stuff, and I'm like, oh, who wrote that? That was good. So, you know, there's good days and bad days.
Yeah. Well, preferably the second one is the one we're going for.
Absolutely.
Of course, then there's the editing process, which theoretically makes everything better.
Yes. I have an interesting approach to editing. I almost always add. When I edit, I don't reduce, I add. And I think that's because, I mean, I definitely cut stuff because I do write stuff that's overly wordy. Right. But I think that's because sometimes when I write a first draft, I leave out details. I focus on the characters and the story, and I don't put in enough world and atmosphere and description.
Yeah.
And so when I go back and edit, I usually find that what I'm doing is adding color or flavor or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, the first draft of The Lost War was about 130 something, maybe 138,000 words. The final version that went to print was 154,000.
Okay.
So I'm not the kind of author that goes back and tears something down to make it leaner. I'm the kind of guy who goes back and goes, "Oh, I could do with a bit more of this, and I want to describe this better. And oh, here's an interesting idea for a subplot. I'll chuck that in here as well." So yeah, there's literally only one scene from the first draft of The Lost War that I took out, and it was just for pacing. It was just for pacing. I got to it and I felt like we'd been in the same place for too long. And the scene it was a relationship development between two characters, and I just felt that we'd been there for too long and we needed to move on. But what was interesting was I shared it. I've got a sort of after party group for people who've read the book on Facebook, because I can say so little about the plot, and I can't really answer questions without spoilers. So I've actually set up this little, the sort of secure after party group where people who've read it can come and ask me questions, and I'll quite happily answer them because the only people who are there have already read it. And I shared the scene on that page and just said, I thought you might be interested in this. It's the only scene I really cut from the book. And people were like, "Oh, you should have left this in. It's really good. It helps develop the characters." And I'm like,
"Oh no."
What can I say? I don't know. Oops. Oh well. But I suppose, to be fair, I suppose the people who have come to be members of that group liked the book enough that they would like more of the characters. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And of course, it's always incentive to read the book, and then you get the extra bits for joining the group. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of stuff in there. There's, a lot of my research and stuff about, like, I think I've got photographs of my original sort of handwritten notes on the place names and things like that, and my original first hand-drawn map that eventually became the map in the book. So yeah.
Map making. Oh, there's an art that I think more fantasy authors should do.
Oh, let me show you here. I have a cool thing to show you. This was made for me. This was made for me from my map by a friend. How awesome is this?
They did needlepoint. That's fantastic.
They did. And what I love about
map.
this...
Wow.
So
Okay.
This came from close friends of mine. So all from the same family. So the dad in the family is our GM, our group of friends GM. And it was him who properly made the first map for me to work with while I was writing. His daughter is an artist who did my map for the book. Wow. And the mother in the family made this cushion for me. It's like this amazing, perfect gift from this family that, like, between them, they essentially built this cushion for me, for my world.
Wow.
And now I sit here writing with it in the small of my back, keeping me comfortable. So. Wow.
My maps are not nearly as useful as that.
Oh yeah, no, they're great. I have to say, one of the things I did with it was my friend's name's Sean, and I went back to him after a little while and I was like, I'm struggling with distance. Like, how do I work out distances and how far people can travel? Because I was particularly after seeing the end of Game of Thrones, I was very conscious of making sure people took the time required to travel instead of teleporting around the place. And so I was like, and he was like, "Here, I'll send you another one with a 5 mile hex on it." So I've got a version of the map, the original map, with 5 mile hex grids on it, just so I can count them up and work out how far and people can travel in a day and stuff like that to make sure it's all okay.
Wow, that's really cool. Distances, I'm terrible at distances, so I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I really had to work, and with such a lot of traveling as well. I ended up keeping an Excel spreadsheet of where everybody was and when, on what day, to make sure that it all made, to make sure that people who traveled for 3 days were not in this, and people who traveled for 2 days did not end up on the same day having things happen. Because, so yeah, I was very careful about making sure that it all actually made logistical sense.
Oh, I appreciate that, because a lot of the times in my own books I'm terrible at it, but in reading other books I go, wait a second, this doesn't quite add up properly.
Yeah. I mean, and it all, when that kind of stuff happens, the only thing that's really particularly annoying about it is it kind of pulls you out of the story, doesn't it? Because you kind of go, wait a minute, how can he be there? You
Yeah.
said that was 3 days away, but it's only been a day. How come that happened?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I was very conscious of trying to make sure that nobody jumped somewhere they shouldn't be and couldn't get there faster than was humanly possible.
Yeah. Unless there's a bit of extra zhuzhing going on.
Well, yeah, with a bit of with a bit of magical influence, then as long as you can explain it and it makes sense and it's consistent, then yeah,
That that is the hard part. The
that's
making
it.
sense bit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the consistency. I mean, the consistency can be hard, especially when you've got to try and remember what you've said before. I think at one point I realized I had described the same character as having dark hair and blonde hair at different points in the book, and was like, oh, oops, better fix that.
Yeah, I've done that with eye color. Eye color is the one
Right?
I was
Okay.
remembering. It's like, oh, this person, I mean, it was very important that something, they eye color. What was it? Yeah.
Yes.
So
I mean that's another. I had to keep track of like character. I've got a sheet of character names because I used Gaelic for all the magic words. I've got a sheet of magic words and what they mean. Like I've got
yeah,
all these documents just sitting because I have to keep going back and referring to them because I just can't keep it in my head.
yeah, yeah. No, that can be a bit tricky, and people who can do it because they are out there are very impressed with that. I'm not one
Oh
of
yeah.
them.
No, no, no. I can't. I can't. I regularly had to, and especially like in a fantasy setting where you're making up names. Sometimes just off the top of your head, it's just like a random set of letters. You're like, yeah, that'll
Yeah,
do. That's it. And then you realize this character you used in one scene that you thought you were never going to see again, actually you really want to reuse because there's a reason why they'll be helpful. And you're like, what the hell did I call him?
uh-huh.
What was his name?
Right. The names. Yes. Always the tricky part, especially spelling. I've spelt names several different ways. I have to make sure that it's actually consistent when I go back through and edit. Because I'm, yeah, well,
Yeah, yeah.
always
I've done
fun.
that too. That's another easy one to do, especially like a lot of the place names in Eden are derived from Gaelic original
Right,
names, and so
right.
they're not the spelling of them is not actually all that easy to remember. So I sometimes had
No.
to just find it somewhere else and copy and paste it to make sure that I didn't mess it up.
Yeah, that could be problematic unless your map suddenly becomes really complicated.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, no, it was fun though.
okay. Great fun. Okay, so book two in progress. You can't tell us much because spoilers. Duh. Book one is out though, and the other carp hold on, carpet DM
Yeah.
because Latin. Okay, that's. I need more tea. That one's also out. Any other news that we should know about between now and next book?
Not a great deal. I think probably that as I say, my plan is to get the second Eden book out early next year. I think I will likely go straight into writing the third one and have that out maybe the end of next year if I can.
Sure.
Um, and then I definitely am going back to write the sequel to Carpet Diem because I've been promising that now for several years, and I feel every time I have to move away from it, I feel bad about it, and I feel bad for the people who've read Carpet Diem and said, "Oh, can we have another one?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll definitely write another one. I will write another one. I promise I will write another one." Um,
Eventually.
Eventually, yes, indeed. But no, so that's the current plan, and then once those are done, my long-term plans, I have kind of 3 or 4 ideas for other books. None of them matching the genres of either of the books that I've written so far. I've got an idea for an urban fantasy murder mystery,
Ooh.
and I've got an idea for a futuristic sci-fi superhero political thriller.
Wow.
So yeah, whatever I write after Eden and the next Carpet Diem book will be, I think, whichever book is screaming at me the loudest. But I'm apparently not going to follow the sort of sensible business model of sticking to one genre because I have ideas that go all over the place in different genres. So
I do that too, and I don't really care.
yeah, I think part of it is you have to write what you're excited about
Yeah.
because if you're not excited about it, you're not going to get readers excited about it.
Right.
And so I think I've learned from bitter experience that trying to write the wrong book is a bad idea, and you should write the book that you're excited about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it has been absolutely fantastic talking with you. I'm very interested in these books. They sound like rather large amounts of trouble in very different ways. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Is there
Cool.
anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think so. Other than just to say, the books are available through Amazon. They're both in Kindle Unlimited. Both of them have audiobooks as well, if that's
Oh,
more your kind of thing. And you can find out more about me at justinleeanderson.com, my website.